In this video, I'm going to read Survival is Morality, a foundational essay from the Herd Ethics framework. It explores why survival is the first moral truth and how recognizing that changes everything we know about ethics, agency, and collective responsibility. Whether you're a philosopher, a policymaker, or someone looking for deeper clarity, I hope this challenges and sharpens how you see the world. Humans have always experienced gravity. It keeps our feet on the ground, our coffee in the cup, and our bones from drifting into space. Yet, for most of history, gravity was simply felt, not understood. It wasn't until Isaac Newton, relatively late in the arc of human civilization, gave that invisible force a name, gravitas, Latin for weight. That name carried explanatory power for centuries. Gravity was a force, a pull. End of story. Then came Einstein. Rather than asking what gravity feels like, he asked what gravity precisely is. And by reframing the question, he changed everything. He showed that gravity wasn't a force pulling on objects through space, but rather a curvature in space-time itself. In that moment, gravity went from a described effect to a discovered substrate. This shift from surface observation to structural foundation is precisely what herd ethics attempts to do for morality. Humans, like gravity, have always experienced morality. Moral codes stretch back to the earliest civilizations. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Code of Hammurabi, the Torah. These were observations, not theories. Then came the legacy of thinkers, Plato, Kant, Rawls, just to name a few. They told us what morality looked like. Plato thought that morality was about cultivating virtue, wisdom, justice, courage. Live virtuously, he said, and you will live morally. Rawls imagined a veil of justice, behind which we design fair rules, acting as if we didn't know our place in society. And I will personally admit, that veil saved me from getting the smaller half of the cookie more than once. Again, remember, whoever breaks it picks last. But as with Newton, these legacy thinkers were describing what morality feels like, not what it is. They gave us effects. What herd ethics asks is the deeper Einsteinian question: what is the substrate of morality? Herd ethics proposes that survival, not just a background condition for moral reasoning, it is the floor beneath it. No agents, no interpretation. No interpretation, no good or bad. No good or bad, no morality. Remove the agents and morality vanishes with it. This is not a sentiment, it is a structural fact. Morality, then, is not an abstract ideal. It is a praxeological strategy, a set of purposeful behaviors evolved or adopted to increase the survival of both the individuals and the herd. What we call good is often what sustains. What we call evil often depletes. Rawls might have said, don't steal, because you wouldn't want to be stolen from. Herd ethics says, don't steal because theft triggers herd depletion. And herd depletion, taken too far, leads to herd collapse. Then agent collapse, and ultimately the collapse of morality itself. Rawls wasn't wrong. He just didn't dig deep enough. The same is true for most legacy thinkers. They described morality's shape, but herd ethics locates its source. Survival isn't just a concern with morality. It is the condition that makes morality possible. It is the floor beneath all value. Survival is morality. When was morality born? Platonists might argue that morality has always existed, eternal, abstract, independent of human experience. Theists may believe morality was handed down by God, or that moral behavior reflects God's nature. Herd ethics offers a different origin story. Now, it is important to know that this story is not anti-theist. In fact, if one understands God as the sustainer of life, the force that upholds the structure of existence, then herd ethics sounds less like a contradiction and more like a parallel. Sustenance is infrastructure. Continuity is holiness. The overlap is not accidental. But herd ethics makes a simpler claim, the dependency principle. That is, the moment two beings relied on each other, morality is born. This principle flows naturally from the herd ethics framework. Ethics does not emerge from belief or sentiment, but from structure, specifically the structure of interdependence. Morality arises the moment two agents can affect each other's outcomes. From that moment forward, actions carry consequences, not just physically, but morally. Obligation is not born from feeling, but from function. Consider the logic. No dependency, no obligation. No obligation, no ethics. No ethics, moral language becomes void of meaning. Without interdependence, there is no moral frame. Concepts like should, ought, or good become linguistically empty, words without a reference. The herd does not need philosophical consensus, divine commandments, or moral intuition. It needs only the possibility of affecting one another's survival. That alone is enough to give weight to action. Most theories stop at Darwin. Whatever survives wins. Herd ethics asks once more, why does survival matter in the first place? This shift from description to prescription reorients the entire moral field. Darwin explained how traits persist through natural selection, how life, quite literally, sorts itself by persistence. Traits that aid survival propagate. Survival becomes the ultimate selector. But Darwin left something unanswered. Why does survival matter at all? Why do organisms fight to persist? Why does anything, be it a cell, a society, or a civilization, struggle to remain? Most moral systems assume survival as a backdrop. They begin with living agents, already breathing, already choosing, already mattering. But this skips the deeper question. We ask again, why does survival matter at all? Herd ethics answers that question directly. Because survival is morality, not sentimentally, but structurally. Survival is not just a biological impulse, it is a moral act when it sustains the infrastructure that makes moral meaning possible. This is why herd extinction is the deepest form of harm. Not because death is sad, but because extinction eliminates the very space in which right and wrong can exist. No agents, no judgment. No judgment, no morality. Or to put it slightly different, if survival collapses, morality collapses with it. If survival is the moral substrate, then the herd, that which holds collective infrastructure that makes survival possible, holds primary moral title. This title, or rights, is not earned by merit, but arises from functional dependency and consequence. The herd protects agency by sustaining the very infrastructure that allows agents to exist in the first place. Without it, there are no agents left to even ask ethical questions. From this, the herd dependency principle follows naturally. That is, if an advantage depends on non-excludable, collectively supplied infrastructure, then primary moral title resides with the collective. The individual holds at most a stewardship claim, not an ownership right. In herd ethics, moral judgment is grounded not in intention, but in consequence. This becomes clear when we examine the core moral equation, which quantifies how close an agent is to collapse. That is, the viability margin, Vm equals Va minus Vt. And I'm going to put up a little kind of example here on the screen, but that's where, Vm equals viability margin. That's the remaining buffer before collapse. VA equals viability advantage. That's an agent's currently held viability critical capacities. And VT equals viability threshold, which is the minimum required to persist at all. So if VM is less than or equal to 0, the agent fails. And when no agents remain with viable capacity, the herd collapses. And with it, so does moral judgment and obligation. Now, I am moving very quickly when it comes to describing the core moral equation. But for a full breakdown, visit herdethics.com/core moral equation. It's also written in the book as well, which alludes to it more. But do know I am moving very quickly through this, just because those each could, the core moral equation itself would be, maybe perhaps a whole video series in and of itself. And, well, maybe one day. Next, though, is the herd depletion effect. We now see clearly the very essence of morality depends on survival. With that understanding comes a core threat to moral continuity. When individuals withdraw from, privatize, or refuse to sustain herd-dependent systems, the protective and enabling capacities of those systems begin to erode, not just for themselves, but for everyone. More of that is found in Appendix A in the book titled Herd Ethics, which you can either purchase on Amazon if you want, especially if you want to support Herd Ethics, or you can download it completely free at herdethics.com. It's right on the front page, and there is no paywall. There's not even an email. It's literally click to download a PDF. The paperback version is nicer to read, I think. But again, the goal of this is just to get this information out there as quick as possible, as easy as possible, and as accessible as possible. So you can buy that, get a paperback delivered to you, or a Kindle version as well, or just download it. Whatever floats your boat. Anyhow, this is the herd depletion effect. Okay, so what I just named there was the herd depletion effect. It is not merely economic. It is existential. So the erosion of shared infrastructure leads not just to collapse, but to the disappearance of moral possibility itself. Again, if the herd is that which holds moral title, and degradation of infrastructure causes the herd to collapse, well, then agent collapse is inevitable. And when all agents collapse, then morality ceases to be a possibility. Anyhow, this is best understood through the chain of moral consequence, rooted in the core moral equation. And the core moral equation is, and I'm going to put this on the screen. Again, you can find it online. So you have the agent plus infrastructure equals the advantage. So A is any agent, that could be human, AI, institution. I is shared, non-excludable infrastructure, which is shorthanded as the herd. So the herd is that which holds moral title. The herd is that which holds infrastructure. V is realized advantage. So that could be health, cognition, power, or survival. So the chain of moral consequence. So A, so that's agent. A gains V, so that's advantage. V is extracted from I, which is the infrastructure. A withholds stewardship or reinvestment, which contributes to a net deficit equals HDE depletion. Net deficit accumulates. I, the infrastructure, erodes. Resilience and optionality shrink over time. Eroded infrastructure approaches the viability threshold. Then the agent starts to destabilize, then fail. As infrastructure degrades, the agent's operating margin narrows. Once the threshold is crossed, collapse becomes irreversible. Individual failure cascades through shared dependencies, and continued depletion can trigger total herd collapse. Eliminating agency and the space for moral judgment. Collapse of sufficient agent voids morality. No viable subjects, no moral judgments. I'm going to put up a shorthand on the screen here. This paper works out really well to read it. But YouTube, I think YouTube is important. I'm willing to say, a third of everything I've ever learned has been off YouTube. Is that an embarrassing thing to admit? I don't think so. But it's pretty accurate. That being said, I'm making it, I'm doing my very best to make this accessible on YouTube as well, because I do know a lot of individuals, a lot of thinkers, a lot of everybody is on watching YouTube videos. They're just nice to watch and listen to. But again, this does make more sense if you actually look at it, especially anything with the core moral equation related. But again, for a full breakdown, just go to herdethics.com/core moral equation. So what then should guide our ethics? Not universal compassion, not abstract rights, not ideology, but this. Continuity is the minimum viable substrate for morality, which is why herd ethics rests on a single moral axiom. Herd continuity is morally preferable to herd extinction. Appendix A in the Herd Ethics book that I talked about in the past, we'll talk more about that. It'll explain again what the herd is, why the herd holds moral title. Yeah. If you have questions, which you should, download the book. It's free. Buy it if you want something in your hand again. But ultimately, I don't really care. Do what's best for you, but do know, the appendix, I had to hit a point where I said, I'm just putting this out there because I can grow the appendix by one thing a day, which is a good problem to have. But my guess is if you're having questions, read the book, especially read the appendix. And my guess is at least your initial questions may be answered in the appendix. And future questions, so if we're getting even deeper, I feel like I feel as if I contemplated a lot of the initial questions and a lot of the deep questions too. But I'm sure there's questions that are, even outside of my scope of view at present. And I know this is true because I'm already working on adding future appendix items in the future. Just know that is what I would highly recommend doing is downloading the book, purchasing whatever works for you, and reading through the appendix, especially if you have questions. But anyhow, so let's go back to this moral axiom. So herd continuity is morally preferable to herd extinction. This is where herd ethics begins, where other systems end. It does not take life as a given. It treats survival itself as a moral act, not selfishly, but systematically. It argues for governance, cooperation, and reinvestment, not because they feel good, but because they are good insofar as they prevent agent collapse. And when all agents collapse, so does morality itself. Darwin told us what survives. Herd ethics asks why survival matters. The result is a moral framework without myth, yet full of consequence. It does not sentimentalize life. It justifies it by showing that survival is not beneath morality, but is morality. Without continuity, there is no thought. Without the herd, there is no one left to judge right from wrong. And without survival, there is no moral value at all. If this idea resonated with you, please consider liking or sharing. It helps the algorithm show this video to more people. I'll be releasing more essays and videos soon as the Herd Ethics Project continues to grow. You can read the full text, explore other essays, or get the Herd Ethics book, either for free at herdethics.com or in print and Kindle formats on Amazon. And if you like updates, be sure to join the mailing list while you're there.